Okay, good morning, viewers. I'm your online host, Edmund. Welcome to the second day of the SATA ComHealth Osteoporosis and Fall Prevention Festival. Our next distinguished presenter is none other than Dr. Ture Karahaju Huseman. She graduated as a physiotherapist in Finland. After 11 years as an academic lecturer of biomechanics, rehabilitation, and exercise physiology, Dr. Ture joined HUR Australia in 2015. With a clinical, academic, and research experience, she brings expertise in the design and implementation of best practice exercise solutions in rehabilitation and active aging. Kindly note that questions will only be addressed by the speaker at the end of her talk. Please utilize the built-in Q&A function to pose your questions. Dr. Ture will speak to us now on fall prevention, strength, and balance, from testing to training. I will now hand the stage over to Dr. Ture.
Thank you so much, Edmund. Now let's get started straight away, and I'll get my slides up and then we can make a move. Now, welcome everyone, and thank you, Edmund, and thank you for the host for welcoming me to talk at this presentation. I will send you my wishes from Melbourne, and I wish I was there. But I'm home and everything works well this way as well. So today I'll talk then about the falls prevention, strength and balance, and really talking about the testing and training aspect. Now, without further ado, let's just go straight into the fall and really talking about the fall cycle and what happens when we have a fall. Now, the fall can happen anytime for us. It doesn't ask for your age or where your locations are. But what happens often, if you do have a fall, you'll end up having a fear of falling again. And statistically, we know that if you fall once, you're more than likely to fall again. So we get this instinctive fear and we start moving a bit less because we're afraid that maybe if we fall again, what's going to happen next time? So what then happens is, because we have this fear of falling, we're starting being less active. So we sit more and we don't move around that much. And then what happens consequently is that we actually have a decrease in our muscle strength, and also our balance starts getting worse because we don't have that muscle strength anymore. That then leads into an even more increased risk of falling. And then we're back into the beginning, back to the fall. And then it's easy, even after just one fall, to have this evil cycle happening, this fall cycle, and that we try to get rid of. And if we then look at the circle, there are a few things that can stop the cycle. The first one is activity. If we can start there, if we can avoid people moving around, we can give them more activity, and thus we can preserve and even increase their strength and balance. And that's when we can start giving a better life without falls. Now, I think it's always important to talk about our muscles. Again, this is a conference for falls and osteoporosis, and we've talked about osteoporosis since the good old 80s. But still too often we do not think about the muscles. We do not talk about the wasting of muscles or sarcopenia. And it's really important to think about this, that really after we turn 40, muscle tissues, we lose 8% of muscle tissue per decade. And finally, when we reach our 70s, we're actually losing 15% of our muscles per decade. And there's also studies about that it's not just a muscle mass or muscle strength, but before both of those, we actually lose muscle power, which is then the thing that allows us to stand up and go upstairs and move around. So that power is a very important factor, and that even comes before the mass. So if we then lose our muscles, what happens then? We do lose our strength is going down. And consequently, like I mentioned even before, if our strength goes down, our mobility also goes down because we can't move around anymore. And if our mobility goes down, again, our falls go up. And furthermore, if we think about the scenario, if our muscle mass goes down, that means our osteoporosis risk goes up, which means not the fact that we have the falls, but also the falls have quite dramatic consequences if we have osteoporosis. So it's really important to look at exercise and what kind of exercise we should do, as that is the method we can stop that vicious cycle. And I thought, before we get into the testing and training, let's look at the literature a little bit before. Now, one of the review papers by Sherrington Hall is one of the key features about talking about what kind of exercise we should do. The paper that I'm referring to here is the updated version from 2017. And the key message of that paper is that exercise as a single intervention can prevent falls. There's many things in that article, so I've selected just a few, so I kindly encourage you to look at the full paper. But the big thing is, exercise can reduce the rate of falls in community-dwelling older people by 21%. If we exercise a bit more, we can see even better effects. Or if we have greater effects, if you use exercise program that challenge the balance. So we reduce the base of support, we move the center of gravity, and also we control the body position while standing. That review paper also states that we should do at least 3 hours of exercise per week. We should be including some strength exercises as well. And also the fact that walking alone is not enough. Walking can be as a part of your exercise program, but also the fact that people who are at high risk should not be, suggested to do brisk walking programs. So we really have to be a bit careful there and start from the basics. If we then look at another review paper that really talks about what if we don't just do the basics, but we have a bit closer look at the exercise program and see, can we improve the training? What they then said in this Grenisher and all in their paper, they were saying that traditional balance training does impact postural control, physical function and strength. However, if we then get these specific types of balance training, so having the perturbation-based and also multitasking exercises, we can actually promote the balance recovery mechanisms and also the variable postural controls. Now, this is quite an important feature because we know that a high amount of falls are due to slips, trips, and stumbles. And in all those cases, whether you hit an obstacle or you slip on the ground, it is not just about the slip and a trip and a stumble. It is about what happens afterwards. If you can take that next step, if you're fast enough, you can do a stepping, you have those fast twitch muscles, and you have reaction time. You can avoid the fall by taking the next step. So it is quite important to really understand that we need to do these, not just the simple ones, but try to push ourselves a little bit, yet within a safe frame, of course. So we have to be safe, but push ourselves a little bit. They also said that the traditional resistance training does improve strength performance, but has limited effect on physical function. And it's the physical function that we're really looking into, the fact that we can move better, we have the balance reactions. What they concluded is that if you do power or high velocity strength training, we can have larger effects on explosive force production and also physical function. So we really have to push ourselves also with these ones. We have to think a little bit how we train. And like I said before in the sarcopenia slide, is the fact that our power goes before muscle mass and muscle strength. So we need to pay attention, how do we train, and try to aim to do power training together with all the other strength training and balance training. Now, one more literature review to look at, and this is the one from Stephen Lord's group from 2018. And Stephen Lord, in this review, they tried to look at the novel concepts. What are the new concepts that have entered this area of the exercise for falls prevention? We're going to be looking at the new approaches. One of the first things they looked at exergaming. So looking at initially exergaming, we used to talk about rehabilitation, quite a long time ago, and we're really increased in that area, trying to find the games that challenge our cognition and motor control at the same time. And what they found, that exergaming training improved the physical function, so the balance and strength, but also the cognitive function, so attention and also executive functions, and we're an equivalent efficiency in reducing fall risk as the traditional training programs. Furthermore, they talked about the volitional stepping and found that volitional stepping improved the simple and choice stepping reaction time, gait, balance, global cognition, executive function, short-term memory, and also the dual task ability, and reduced falls by 57%. And the big thing here was that this is based on a literature review. This is not a single study. So it's quite a interesting summary of what we can do with the exergaming and with the novel methods. So looking at this literature review, so what we now know is that best exercise modalities to prevent falls actually are the combination of strength, of balance, and also cognition. So if we combine these three things, we can actually do miracles and really go from, remember the Sherrington paper talked about 21% reduction, then we talked 57% reduction with the exergaming, and we can do even further. So if we combine these, I have a few studies to present to you to talk about, to see really what happens when we combine these. The first study that I wanted to show to you is the Sunbeam study, which Jenny Hewitt and her team did a few years ago. Now, Jenny's study is based on residential aged care. So Jenny had a set of strength training equipment that she took at 16 residential aged care facilities. She took her truck and she took the equipment to a facility and ran a program for 12 weeks, and then they moved the equipment to the next location. And every time when she's taken the equipment away, they would continue with another program on site, still continuing with the strength with slightly differently. Now, in this study, Jenny had 221 people taking part, and the average age was 86 years old. And these were quite frail older people. So it was really like a residential aged care, so slightly on the frailer side. And the conclusion is in this slide. What really happened, they had 55% reduction in falls after this group. And they also then they looked at in different papers also about the finance effects and what happened. But with the strength and balance training, they managed to have a 55% reduction in falls. Now let's take a look at their program a little bit. So in Jenny's study, they had 5, strength training pieces, really quite a lot of focusing on leg muscles. And leg muscles is the one we usually focus on, because when we think about squats and legs, your leg muscles are the ones that allow you to get up from a chair. They allow you to walk. They allow you to transfer. And also your leg muscles, your quadriceps has 4 parts, plus your hamstrings a few, plus your glutes. They're large muscle groups. And we also know then that your muscles store the protein. The protein you need in order to get healthy if something happens to you, if you get ill, so you can fight disease. So your leg muscles are your muscles of life. A lot of these studies really focus on legs, like was Jenny's study. So we're talking about leg curl and extension, so knee flexion and extension. We had a leg press, there was adduction, abduction, and also abdominal and back. We have some core strength exercises as well, and then they're having a tricep stick as well. So aiding you if you fall, it's good to have the triceps power. And what Jenny then did, the training principles were the fact, and in this one, it was really initially quite moderate intensity, and rather than measuring the maximum strength, Jenny really progressed on the client and seeing how they would feel. Does it feel light? How does the strength feel to them? And progressing based on that. So basically they start with quite a moderate intensity, started with 2 sets of 10 repetitions. And then when the participant reported that the load was feeling somewhat light, they then increased to 3 sets. And then once they got comfortable with that, then they increased the resistance until the participant felt moderate resistance. And in this, so when we talk about the strength training for health and really with having the exercises medicine effects, you got to train pretty hard. You really have to progress all the time. You can't stick to the little ones. Jenny's study here is a really good example of showing how we can progress, because we can progress by increasing the resistance, or increasing the repetitions, or increasing the sets. So there's 3 different ways, and we can sort of play around with our clients there to see which way we want to increase. But in this study, again, 2 to 3 sets of 10 repetitions, aiming with the resistance that the people felt it was moderate in their subjective way. Jenny's study also had balance component. And as you can see in the static balance components, Jenny actually included more upper body exercises. So while we train the balance exercises, she used a TheraBand, and while doing standing, rather than just standing still, she was doing biceps curls and also shoulder retractions, but then also standing feet together. So the base, that was the static component. And she also had a dynamic component, which consisted of heel raises, toe raises, recovery steps, and reaching outside the base of support, and also the grapevine steps. So in the dynamic balance part, Jenny again followed what we showed in the Sherrington one. So they actually, they followed, you push your boundaries. You don't just try to stay within the base of support, but you take the steps. The way she made safe is that they were in a circle around a table, so everybody could hold on to the table. And also when you went to the more difficult parts, such as the grapevine steps, so then the group leader was holding the hands of the people. So everybody felt safe, even though they were pushing the boundaries a little bit. Now let's look at one community project. So this was the Muscling Up Against Disability study, which was done in Burnie Brae in Brisbane. And similar to Jenny's study, they had a lot of leg-based exercises. So they had a leg press, leg extension curl, and adduction abduction. But also they had upper body exercises in the form of back row, and also the chest press, and also abdominal and back extension. So in this group, they have community-based clients. The training principles were slightly different because it was a community care with people who were slightly healthier, so they could actually do a proper strength training in the beginning, and thus they were able to modify or plan their program based on their assumed maximum strength. So what they did in this one, they started for their first 2 weeks on 2 sets of 8 repetitions at 50% of maximum capacity. Then progressed on week 3 to 4 to increase into 3 sets of 8 repetitions at 65% of maximum capacity estimated based on the training. And also then week 5 onwards, they increased the intensity to 75%. Then at the highest intensity, the participants, when they were able to complete 8 repetitions before fatiguing, then they moved on to the next one. And then finally, they increased the resistance when participants could complete 3 sets of 12 repetitions using correct techniques. So as per Jenny's study, for the progressions, they were increasing the repetitions, the sets, and also the resistance. So really trying to use all the different components. So having 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions until people felt tired. They also had a balance training component. They had static balance exercises on standing on one leg. They also had dynamic exercises in the form of tightrope walking, box stepping, and also calf raising. Now, the results of this study was quite impressive, as the participants really experienced, on average, greater than a 230% increase in upper, lower, and core body strength. And once we look at the other parts of the details, there was a 33% improvement in their leg strength, a huge thing there, and also 13% increase in overall physical performance. And the physical performance measured by your time to up and go and all the other, physical performance tests is an important part. As look, we do strength training to create bigger muscles, to store the important proteins and to keep us moving. But the point of keeping us moving is to provide us, we can do things, we can have our function can be up, and thus our quality of life can be up because we can do the things that we want to do. So this is a very important improvement. The next one, 23% drop in the risk of sarcopenia, what we talked about before. So that's another important thing. We can try, by keeping the muscles alive, we can prevent falls and we can keep the function up and thus the quality of life. 7% reduction in frailty. So we can keep the people at home living the life they want to live. Also, significant reduction in falls, and also the reduction in depression and anxiety. And also, of course, there were the subjective results of people managing to drop their walking aids and just feeling more comfortable and feeling in charge of their lives. Now, the other protocol that I want to take a look at added another component. So this was a strength and balance supplemented exercise program, so supplemented with computerized cognitive training. Now, in this one, again, they had their strength training component with leg curl and extension, hip extension, rhomboideals, adduction, abduction, abdominal and back, also an ankle dorsal and plantar flexion, which is really important for a postural sway and again, strips and slips. Their training principles were that they were doing a 12-week program twice a week, were including 30 minutes of strength and 10 minutes of balance, and they were, again, progressing as per the client's comfort. In this study, they also did other exercises. So they did the static balance, such as one-legged stand. They also did the dynamic balance, so stand-up, standing and walking on heels. Really different walking exercises, such as backwards and sideways, doing your turns, transfers. And they also did sit-to-stands, knee squats, and also on balance program, doing a dynamic balance on an air cushion, and also had a flexibility exercises. Now, in this study, they had the control group and the test group, and what the other group was allowed to do was cognitive training. So for the test group, they had a 12-week cognitive training as well, using the Cogni Plus training program, which they did 3 times a week for 10 minutes, and they had 3 different games: alert, select, and divide. And in this study, then, what they found is that they found even better results for the group that also did the cognitive training. So they found that the exercise program that aimed at improving tasks that require attention control should include the cognitive challenging elements. So they found a bit more false prevention aspect with those ones who did the cognitive training. So if they combine strength and balance training with these specific cognitive training tasks, it really has a positive additional effect on this dual task cost of walking, gait initiation, and divided attention. And we know that this is really important because as we go walking outside, there's cars, there's people, there's birds, there's dogs, there's people talking and sound. So it's quite rare that we can walk in an environment that doesn't divide our attention at all. Also, the findings then further confirm the previous research showing that the strength balance training improves the executive function and reduces falls. So looking at these things, we really know that what are the key points then that we try to do our strength training with. So let's take a look at a little bit about the assessment and training of these different parts. So when we're looking at strength first, now traditionally we do functional tests to verify what kind of strength we have. So we're looking sit to stands, we're doing how many times we can sit up from our chairs, we might do time up and go, and all these different things. Or we can do manual muscle testing on using a dynamometer. So there's quite a huge number of tests, but often in these ones, there is a subjective component. So sometimes it is good to have the numbers because numbers really tell the truth. So with, you can do an isometric strength tracking with a Biodex or other equipment if you have the chance to use them. But one HUR then developed is that we have a handheld isometric tester that then the handheld device has a little strain gauge that we can, lock into the equipment. So everything in the rehab range, all the equipment, we can do isometric strength testing on the same machines as we train with. And then we can get the number and we can then compare between the sides. We can compare between before and after. It's quite hard to compare between individuals because our levers are different. So I personally wouldn't do that. And you can use it as an estimate to give you some idea for what kind of training programs you do. But really it's there to verify, is your training working? And maybe if you have an asymmetry. Now then, how do we then strength train? And I'll show you a little clip, and I've used a clip for this one. It's about the leg press because, I've said before, legs are important to do. So as an example of strength training equipment that we can offer, I chose this one. Now, the whole idea behind the HUR machines is that they're pneumatic. So pneumatic then means that it is an air-based resistance, and the air-based resistance has quite a few benefits. That means that you can do speed training. So before, when, a few slides behind, I mentioned the advanced training, and one of them mentioned speed training. So because of the pneumatic, then allows that the resistance is constant, even if you go fast. So sometimes then you can do speed training, which means you're trying to recruit your fast twitch muscles. And also with the pneumatic, it mimics the normal function. So you're doing your concentric and eccentric training at the same time. And furthermore, with the pneumatic, we can go as low as 100 grams in resistance and also 100 grams in the progression, which means that even the frailest people can actually do training. So we have, for example, we have palliative care units still using the exercises, because if you start at 100 grams and you make it to the kilo, that means you've improved by 1,000%. The other thing is, as you can do the person training there, is having the legs separately. Because there is 2 different cylinders, you can train both the feet differently. There's an additional benefit of this, that you might have one leg stronger than the other, but also if there's an incontinence issues, because we know that if you're pushing your 2 legs at the same time, you're increasing the pressure on your pelvic floor, which can be an issue with incontinence. But by doing one leg at the time, you can then reduce that pressure. Another thing I mentioned before then, I mentioned about the power. Now, the new Hi5 machines actually allow you to monitor the power. I was biggest mistake before. But the power training means that we can monitor how much power you do, which means that we can really push to the power training, which we found before was more important than the actual strength training. And also the power is the one that goes before our strength and balance, our strength and muscle volume go. So the power is an important part of our training, and thus we should be training that as well. Now, next thing is in our balance and how we do our testing and training with the balance. So if you look at balance testing, traditionally, then we're looking at, again, the functional testing batteries. You can look at Primo, you can do senior fitness testing. There's multiple different formats that you can then do your balance training with. Or you can use a Romberg or limits of stability. But often the balance testing one also is subjective. So you have an assessor that's monitoring, are you moving? And we can't really see the intrinsics of what's going through. And again, as before with the strength, it is really good to then have numbers. So we can do, use our force platform to actually do the assessments, which means we actually get the biomechanical data. We need the numbers, and then we can really look at what's going on, what's happening with our postural sway. So the HUR options that we then have with our force plate or our smart balance system, we have, that's what the screen looks like. We have 2 different tests. We have the stable and unstable Romberg, and also the limits of stability. And then what we then do in the Romberg testing, which is our traditional one, we can use a full testing pattern. We can use our eyes open and our eyes closed, and also have a foam platform. So our force plate for the smart balance comes with a foam that we can place on a force plate, and therefore we can then look at what's going through. And if we then look at what's happening when we actually do the testing, so the testing will then take for 30 seconds. I'm just going to start the test. So we count down from 5, we place the client on the smart balance and then start the testing. And as you can see now on the platform, we're measuring the center of pressure. Now your center of pressure under your feet is the point, which is the center of all the centers of your segments of your body. So if you have one vector coming from your body, that is the location of that vector. And then we can monitor what happens on that and how our posture is and how we're moving around with our postural sway. Then we can get the data. So we do the full testing. We look at eyes open, eyes closed, with the foam and without the foam. And then we can really start seeing what is happening in our postural sway. So if we look at this one, first is our sway area. So if we look at the sway area, that means that once we're drawing that center of pressure graph with our postural sway, how big is that area? We usually look at 90th percentile because there's always some outliers. You know, you might lose your balance. So 90th or 95th percentile, so we can actually look at that area. We can also see the trace length, and the trace length is that path. So when you're drawing that center of pressure picture, how long is the path from the beginning to the end? We can also look at the velocity. Often, if our balance is quite good, we don't sway that much. It's quite a slow little changes unless there's a perturbation. You might have a higher one, but it's quite slow, the number. And then we can look at also the Romberg quotient, which then verifies what does vision. It gives you a single number and shows you how our vision is impacted, because it's the ratio of that sway area comparing eyes closed and eyes open in percentage. We can then also just look at the sway in the medial lateralis or sideways or anterior posteriorly. And normally we expect to sway more anterior posteriorly because it's our soleus and tibialis anterior that control our sway. So normally we go that way because we can control that. And then we can also have Romberg quotients and looking at the client's data compared to normative data. So whether we fall in the normal range or whether there's some issues and we actually fall is slightly different. And we can then print all this data. We can also then look at the postural graph of what does it actually look like. So in this one, you can see, you know how I talked about we draw the center of pressure graph. So we can take a look at the picture then here on the left. We can see what it looks like. This is the trace of the path. And just by looking at this, we can see slightly leaning to the left, showing that, yes, we're going to be leaning slightly on the left. And then if we look at the feet, we can actually see that we have more weight on the left foot than the right side in percentage-wise. So more than half of the body weight. In normal scenario, you would have 50-50, but now we do indeed have more on the left side. So this is important if they, for example, if you have your stroke patients, if you have your fall clients, any neurological disorders, or even athletes, you know, if you've had knee surgeries and then you've done your rehab, have you recovered well? Are you really evenly distributed? Again, in this summary as well, we can have the trace length, the sway area, and all the other features I mentioned in the in the previous slide. And again, we can print this data out as well. So this is then our testing. Now let's take a look a little bit at what happens, the other testing. So this was the Romberg, and now we're taking a little bit of a look at the limits of stability. The limits of stability, we're just asking the client then to push, you know, lean forward as far as they can and lean backwards also as far as they can. And then we can see how far do they go. And if we then look at this center point, the client is standing in the middle, and then once they're leaning forward, we can see how the center of pressure is moving forward. And we can calculate how far can they move forward and sideways. And then we can see asset performance. We can see if the client did a good job or not. If something happens, you don't have to save the data. You just redo the testing and do another reporting until you're happy with it. And then see, when you're looking at leaning backwards, we can see then the data going backwards as well and seeing how far can the client go. And we really try to verify what are the limits of stability for that client. Then if we start, how do we train them? And again, the olden way or the normal way or at home way, it's not that there's anything wrong. We should still be doing all these exercises. So we're really talking about the static and dynamic balance exercises and heel and toe rises and standing on one foot, doing box steps, tandem walking, rope walks, all these things. But also we can then do training on the same force plate where we did the testing from. Now we have quite a few games and they're trainers and also there's a penguin game for catching fish. But let's look at the trainers a little bit, because in this one we really try to train our center of pressure and see how we can control our bodies in order to in the different games. And we'll take a look at one of them. So this one, this is the maze game. So we have quite a few different mazes, and in all the mazes, there's a little penguin in the corner, and the penguin is trying to get through to the exit door. What we can also then do in these games is we can get the data from the previous testing. So by the limits of stability, we can figure out where do we have issues and what's going on with our training. So we can actually create the program. We can start the penguin on where we think the client needs more help. So then we can look at the speed, we can look at which corner to start, and also the sensitivity, how much central pressure you need to have move over in order for the penguin to move. And then once we're ready and we set this client, there the penguin goes. So in this case, we obviously have more work to do on the right side. So the penguin starts on the left and working to the right. So that we need to be going a little bit more to the right all the time to catch all those stars on the right side. So the last but not least, and we have our cognition that we thought was an important part. So in the cognition with the sensor, we're very lucky to have the sensor on the market, which is the sensor was really a creation of a research team that has created, and they're still doing research. They're constantly doing research to create more and more, to have more games to try to target more of the areas of neuromotor control. Now, first you can do testing on the device, such things as reaction time, selective attention, even cardiovascular fitness, cognitive flexibility and balance. So there's a number of different testing protocols within the game. And then once you've done the testing, we got into the games. And again, every game is specifically designed to target a particular area. So even if from people from falls prevention to having memory, to doing selective attention, to balance spatial orientation, even there's a special game for ADHD at the moment to calm down people. So they're constantly developing the system, and there's more games coming out all the time. So what does it look like? So this is the Dividend platform, and there's one game that we're going to be looking at. So it's an interactive platform for step-based exercises. Again, all the slides we set through are the stepping. Remember, way more falls prevention using the stepping games. So you're going to do stepping to turn your reaction time to move your platform to try to get the next step. So reaction time, cognitive decline, and all these things once. So it's all the stepping games. There's also balance games. There's physical and their cognitive functions and now simultaneously. So you have to focus on your balance, and you've got to focus on your step. And also you have to keep all the time on what is happening in front of you. And also all these games, then they link the cognitive challenges to motor tasks in a virtual environment. And then the really whole idea is that you're trying to achieve a better game most efficiently. Now, let's see what the game looks like. This is one of my favorite games. So in this game, you have the black balls coming from different areas. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the black ball in the center of the target. The more closer to the center you are, the better mark you get. And then the black balls keep on coming faster and faster and from different directions. So this is just one of the games, but then also at the end of the game, you actually get a report, and then you can use that report to look at the progression. So not that you can do pre-test and post-test. You can see the progression throughout your gaming. So every time when you game, you get a score for the data. So basically, as a conclusion now of my presentation, really, multimodality is the best way to get the best outcomes. So as we've gone through the research, it's not just one way. Look, any exercise is great exercise, but for the best result, try to look at the multimodality and really try to look at the strength and the balance and cognition together. Because the more you train and the more you do all these things, the more you can do with your talks. So this is a conclusion, final slide of my study. It's time for me to stop sharing now, and I can see that there's a lot of questions, so I better go ahead and answer those questions. Let's see. Hopefully I can answer them. I'll do my best. Let me just open the questions. Can the exercises be done at home? Yes, definitely. All these exercises can be done at home. We actually did last year with HUR Australia. We did all webinars, and in the webinars, one of our speakers were actually at home, and we talked about the exercise progressions. So if you exercise at home, there could be different things of having your feet further apart if you do some exercises. Using cushions and you might start your balance exercise with quite a wide base of support, and you try to narrow that down, and then progressing further. And also you might at home have TheraBands or even using cushions. And I think the videos we shared a lot, we shared that they're all on our YouTube. It was really great training. I think it was our first and second webinars. We had actually in quite a few of the webinars, we had people coming and also talk about then, how to train at home. But yes, everything can be done at home, and the whole idea, always exercise at home. And also, if you look at the Sunbeam protocols, I've given the slides to the organisers, and all the articles are there. I've written them down, and all the articles have the protocols. And like in Jenny's study, they did the initial training on site, but then afterwards the training was done at home, and that's all written down in the protocols. So you can also do how you can do all these exercises at home. And you can also, if you use a TheraBand, you can have then a different color TheraBand. So if you start with the lighter one and you progress through a firmer TheraBand and see sort of what's going on through there. Now, the next one, your glute muscle. The glute muscle is in your bum. So your bum muscle is the one, the gluteus muscles is the one that moves your hip around. So the glutes are quite an important one. And whilst the glute max, which is really your curvature in your bum, is the one that, because it's such a large muscle, it can store the muscles. But then also the glute on the side is your sidestepping muscles, and that sort of wraps around your hip joint, which is also then an important muscle to protect if you happen to have that fall. So it allows you, it trains you to take the step sideways, but it also has the muscle that lines up the greater trochanter, so that's where you would have the fractures. So we know that your trabecular bone, where osteoporosis attacks you, is not in the cortical bone, but it's in the trabecular bone, which you have in your wrists and your spine and your greater trochanter. So then the glute medius, which is on the side of the hip, then also protects that. So there's a few different parts there. Balance testing. Look, balance testing, what the question was, thank you, what age should we start balance testing? Anytime really, it's, look, I did a study when I was still an academic. We looked at children, and it was interesting having these healthy children coming, and quite often we found these athletic young men and realized that quite poor their balance actually was. And always came to my mind, okay, are you a basketballer? Did you sprain your ankle, and did you do your rehab? And it can be quite daunting to get your young people to do your quite boring balance exercises. So balance assessment does not ask age. It's really for everyone. And any assessment is knowledge, and knowledge is power, because it guides us to better training, and it allows us to motivate to what we can really do. Also, yeah, the COVID-19 at home, definitely the best. And look, the whole idea while we had our webinars, really, it was all COVID driven. What started as, well, I came back from Finland, I was in quarantine and I wasn't bored, but I thought it would be a great idea to start sharing the knowledge. And if you look at our webinar, so it started really with the COVID-19 and trying to give people exercises of exercising at home. And we've been there. Look, Melbourne, we were the world champions of lockdown. So I think it was 257 days that we had to remain within 5 days. So all exercises are great exercises, all I can do. So yes, definitely exercise at home. And even like in our second webinar, or even the first one, we talked about even having milk cans or anything like that. You can fill them with your beans or fill them with rice and lift your milk cans and have a cushion between your legs. And there's quite a few different things you can do at home if you can't get a TheraBand. But take a look at those webinars. I think if you just go look for YouTube channel for HUR Australia, and look, just pick my face, and that's a webinar because I was the MC there. So yes, the first time I'm actually not MCing, so it's quite novel. Now there's more questions. Let's see. I've been seeing them coming up. I think they might be in the chat there. Yeah, for Parkinson's studies, so there's essentially where they were. So Parkinson's, yes, there is actually a lot of studies in Parkinson's about this, and I think in Parkinson's as well. And look, I think MS and Parkinson's, or anything with cognition, is part of it. The cognitive training is very important, and the stepping and rhythm and all these ones. And also strength training wise, I know in Australia there's a researcher called Meg Morris, and I think also Graham Kerr have been doing studies on Parkinson's. So there's quite a few different things. Let's see, I'll try to go through the chat. And yes, the webinars, if I understand right, this is better one to the organisers. But if, as far as I know, they will be uploaded. And I know I've given my slides, so you can also find all the articles. Programs for seniors affordable. Again, organisers can talk about Singapore. All I know is Singapore has a lot of programs running. So I think it's really good to talk to the organisers or HUR Solutions in Singapore. They can tell you exactly where things are running in Singapore. Yes, the exercises we can do daily to improve at home. Take a look at our webinars. I think that's a really good place. With osteoporosis, a big thing about osteoporosis is really that it has to be impact exercises. So anything with an impact and strength training is really good. So in older age, we often talk about how aqua exercises are really good. They are great for if you have osteoarthritis, or they're good for mobility or aqua aerobic exercises, but sadly not for osteoporosis. So osteoporosis, we do need that impact and we do need the strength training. So anything with an impact is really good, and everything strength training. So, and I think in those slides and also the latest webinar we had was a sarcopenia one. So in that one, we had Robin Daly is our webinar for April this year. Robin is a sarcopenia and osteoporosis researcher from Deakin University. So if you take a look at that one on my YouTube channel, you will find some really, really great exercises you can do at home. And also in that webinar, we had Michelle Street, an exercise physiologist, talking about the home-based exercises as well. Next one, walking, what exercise would recommend? At home exercises, doing your strength training exercises. I think if you do nothing else, doing sit-stands and having by your age is a really good article that Robin Daly then talks about as well, which is called the exercise snacking. And he also shows from UK a quick 5 exercise sheet. I can even send that to the organisers if you want to. That really goes through what are the most important things to do at home if you want to have osteoporosis and falls prevention. The key is your balance and your legs. So doing sit to stand, so just rising up, having your hands on the side, rising up from the chair about 10 to 15 times, and then also holding on to a table or chair, doing rising up to your toes and doing a bit of hip extensions, raising your legs sideways. So I'm happy to provide that to the organisers as well, so they can pass it on to anyone who wants to have, and also HUR Solutions, or if you want to look at our website, YouTube channel. Now, am I getting everyone else? Okay, need slides, Parkinson's. Okay, I'm doing this. Similar programs on Singapore, talk to the performance or HUR Solutions. So rather than HUR Australia, HUR Solutions will have all the places. Let's see, have I now tried everything else? Yes, so is there a centre that as senior came, there's quite a few places with the HUR program. So I think I'm always amazed when I come to Singapore and can find all these sites. So it's really, I'm very impressed and always coming to Singapore. And I hope that next year I get to be live in Singapore and visit your sites again and maybe give another talk. Now, Edmund is coming back. I'm sure I'm horribly over time. Is there anything new in the Q&A, or did I get everything? The glutes, they're very difficult to push up. You can start doing the glutes also sitting down. Let's say we're planning a group. Okay, the last one. Let's say we're planning a group exercise class for older adults. I'm torn between involving HUR machines, which we have, or the group exercises versus focusing on a good home exercises version they can to continue with follow-up using. Look, in that case, I really would do all of them. I think nothing is taken away. You can divide that. You can use the HUR exercises, but then also, like, if you follow Jenny's program, if you can download Jenny's paper and take a look at the protocol she's done, because she did all the HUR equipment plus all the other exercises, and people continued at home. I think the best outcome you get is by doing everything. Where the HUR equipment is helping you is that if you have people who are quite frail, you can start at 100 grams, which is a lot less than your body weight. So people who are quite frail, it can be very difficult to stand up. So even if you are on a site where they would have maybe the multi-4, because the multi-4 has even the one assisted squat. So people who can't get up from a chair can be helped by the machine to get up from the chair, which can then give them to have a goal start. And then start with the machines, but then as soon as people are strong enough to do it at home, can actually lift their body weight, then you can really go to those exercises. So I think it's a combination. I don't think you should choose by any means, but really try to include all of them if possible. That's my advice. And I'm looking, is Edmund going to soon say, no more smoking? Because I think I've gone through everything.
Okay.
Oh. Brilliant. Is there any other questions, or what do you say, Edmund?
Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you, Dr. Toure, for your most enlightening presentation. And thank you, viewers, for joining us at this session. Do check out our other webinars over the next 2 days. If you would like to receive Dr. Toure's slides, please email your request to mediacontact@sata.com.sg. I repeat, small letters, mediacontact@sata.com.sg. For other inquiries, SATA ComHealth's hotline number is 6244-6688. 6244-6688. Okay, do join us for the opening ceremony at 1 p.m., which will include a talk and exercise routine by a senior citizens health and fitness interest group called Team Strong Silvers. Thank you very much for sharing the last hour or so with us. Okay, goodbye from all of us here.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, organisers. And thank you to everyone who listened. See ya. Bye.
Bye.